Yeah, hi. So some of you were interested in an instructional video regarding the correct score market. So I'm going to just give you a quick sort of overview of how I trade it, which of course isn't necessarily how you should trade it. You've got to be comfortable with what you're doing. And so I'll crack on from here. Incidentally, there'll be no trading in this video. It's just purely instructional, as I say. So the first thing to remember really is that the big three markets are all linked and efficient. I will trade the correct score market at times, but if it gets really busy, I'm not going to start managing, 3, 4, 5 games with unmatched bets sort of all over the screen and getting stressed that they're not going to get matched, or the possibility of even forgetting a game that then kicks off and leaves me sort of scrambling for to get those bets matched, or forcing me to come out for a loss, whatever it might be. So you've got to remember that over 2.5 goals, if that's the way you were going, that takes care of all scores from 2-1 upwards, and if it's really busy, I might just do that and then manage my sort of positions from here. I mean, betting in two markets, trading in two markets isn't generally a good idea, because I'm pretty sure you still get nailed for commission in both markets, but the gives you the option of, say, over 2.5, and then if you find in the game that sticking on a 2-0, you might want to cover the 2-0. So you can still got the same sort of flexibility, but you don't have the issue of having to manage a load of positions. And it's also quite hard to get your bets matched on the other side of the book in the correct score market, because it's not that liquid. And quite often you might get 3 out of 5 matched, but the other 2 might come in dramatically, and from a value perspective you might have been better off just back in the 2.5 or over 2.5. So it's worth remembering. I mean, match odds, again, if you want to back Napoli, all you're doing is the equivalent in the correct score market is 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1, 3-0, etc. on Napoli, and you could go that way. If you were heavily backing Napoli, you might want to take out a couple of scores. So it doesn't really, the correct score market, yes, it's the correct score market, but you can also abbreviate, as it were, or adapt to get the same result between markets, especially since it's a more complex market to trade in. So it's worth remembering. So personally, as I was saying, I like to look for goals. So I'm gonna go for teams that score goals, and there are occasions I'll be much more cautious. If it's a top of the table clash, or two teams that are very close together in the top 4, a game that really means something. Both those teams, simply because they're up there, probably have got very good scoring records. Mainly against other teams mid-table and down at the bottom, it follows. So they may not have a particularly good scoring record against each other, although they're knocking a lot of goals in. So just because they're scoring a lot of goals, or have scored a lot of goals, doesn't mean it's going to be a sort of qualifier for me. And often those big matches are quite cagey affairs, especially maybe towards the end of the season, that there's a lot at stake, or more at stake, because the title is still close, and the teams are both in with a chance. So it's worth bearing in mind. Similarly, teams at the bottom of the league, it can be anything. It can be a goal fest, but usually they're quite poor quality, so they haven't been putting the goals in, and they haven't been letting them in, or rather they have been letting a lot of goals in, but doesn't mean that they're good enough to score against each other. So I don't really like this sort of inconsistency of teams that are down at the bottom of the league. I'm They may be consistently losing, but I would tend to stay away from them, even if I feel for some reason or other that there might be goals in that game. But it's rare that I do in the first place, because, as I've said, not many goals are probably being scored by those teams. Bank size, yeah, that's really crucial. I think more punters go broke because of bad money management, or certainly a lot of potentially good traders and bettors go bust and give up because they just haven't managed their fund properly, or they've gone on tilt and chased their bets, or whatever it is. So personally, I use a 100-point bank. So £1 bets, I would need £100, and £10 bets, £1,000. And with respect to trading, so basically I do something like this. If I wanted to bet 4 selections, it would just be a case of £2.50 on each, or I'll show you how to sort of equalize that profit in a minute, but that would be the way I do it, so that my stakes are consistently the same. So here I've got the £10 liability and the profit accordingly. If I want to just keep it simple, I can take this stake button here and put in my £10, click OK, and basically I've got my £10 liability there and my equal profit on the other 4 scores. And as soon as I decide to take out a couple of those, then obviously my liabilities decrease, but I want to keep to my £10 liability, so I then increase the stakes on the other 2 scores. If it's just the 2 and my profit is larger, potentially liability the same, but obviously I'm only covering 2 scores now, and the risk of them not being hit is greater. So it's best just to play around with that. Go into your settings, check the what if scenario, the what if checkbox, and you can sort of play around with it as I'm doing now. The other thing to remember with your bank is that is 100 points enough? You've got to firstly know that you're profitable, so you want to have a big sample of bets. If you're betting, bet and forget. If you're running a system, at least a couple of thousand. For me, that's the way it works. I've been testing stuff for seasons long, eliminating stuff. I've got sort of 2 on the go at the moment. They're about a season and a half in. I might do a video about that later, but after 2,000 bets, I still reckon I've got a sort of 10% chance. I'm just being lucky, or the system is just being lucky. So it can take a long time to prove. I think trading is better. I think if you're involved, a few hundred trades, you probably will get a feel for whether you're trading profitably. But it's tough. But so as far as possible, you don't want to even be bothering with a bank until you know you're profitable. So paper trade it, or trade it to very small stakes, and go from there. And once you've decided that you want to bet or trade and you want to establish a bank, let's say 100 points, you've got to ask yourself, is that 100 points going to be enough? If I lose 60 points, if I lose 60% of my bank, am I just going to jack it in and call it a day? Or am I going to say, no, this, I know I'm profitable, I'm confident in whatever method, strategy, system I'm using. Am I going to come back and slowly regain or re-establish this bank through my trading? and that can be quite tough. I have a guy I know in America as an American handicapper, US sports, had a terrible time during COVID. I don't quite know what was going on out there, but I imagine a lot of games cancelled and people came back. Probably a lot of players were out with COVID, bit like in the UK, in that football season. But yeah, he suffered really badly. I think he was down 65 points or 65% of his bank, but he's been betting for decades, so he had the confidence to carry on. No doubt he made a loss that year, but in the following year he basically got back to where he was and was in profit. So you sort of need to be sure that 100 point bank isn't just a 60-point bank in disguise, and you may well want to increase to say 150 points, and other people may, if you're trading, you're not betting. If you're trading, you think, well, I'm profitable. I'll do 2% of my bank. You'll risk more. So I tend to keep my stakes level. I don't really like to. I'll keep them level to a certain point. Maybe a few seasons go by, and I think, right, I'll increase by 20% or 50%. So I want to make more money. But I don't generally sort of have percentage increases after every bet or every other bet or every 5 bets, because I don't know. I think if you have a positive expectation, you're bound to be more profitable. But if a lot of people, they're kind of overdoing it, overcooking it, and they hit a big winning run, and their stakes are increasing, and just they hit the peak of those big stakes, they hit an even longer losing run, and because their stakes are bigger, they probably not reducing. I don't think a lot of people don't reduce by a percentage every bet they lose. So it's sort of you go way past the point at which you basically make bigger losses than profits in a sort of shorter space of time. And similarly, cutting your stakes because of a losing run, means that often when it turns, the correction finishes. Look, there is a correction in terms of winning bets again. Your stakes are smaller, and you're not getting back to where you were. So I just leave it alone really, and just keep things as simple as possible. But that's completely up to you. Okay, so another query was, how do the correct score markets move? Yeah, it can be quite confusing at the beginning. Certainly, if the market stays 0-0, it's quite simple. The only sort of counterintuitive one might be 0-1 and 1-0. The longer it's 0-0, the price on 0-0 come in, and that will carry on throughout the game as long as it's 0-0. The 0-1s and 1-0s will also contract though. When I first started a bet, I thought, hold on, they should really drift, albeit maybe slowly. But basically, because goals are scored in games more often than not, the 1-0 and 0-1 come in sort of in anticipation of a goal. So all three of those score lines contract. 2-0s, depending on the game, 2-0s could stay in or around that price for quite a long time. And if one team is doing well, it'll come in quite quickly, and the other team's 2-0 price will drift quite dramatically. And if it's 0-0 in the first half, the bigger scores will start to drift much more quickly, and any other home win and away win where a team needs 4 goals, those scores just really basically start drifting after the the kickoff whistle's been blown. So it's worth remembering, the best thing to do, the best advice I can give is to pick a game with a heavy home favourite, then maybe pick a game with an away favourite. Just look at the game, look at the odds. If Napoli against Liverpool, if Napoli scored an early goal against Liverpool, that's at 17.5 wouldn't come in. It would drift. and it's too soon for people to start thinking that it's going to be 1-0 and 1-0 to the underdog if it's just a few minutes in. So it's it maybe it might be in the Champions League slightly different. Liverpool haven't been playing that well, but it's generally when the odds can drift out on scores quite dramatically if early goals are scored. That's what I'm saying. So and more goals are expected. So it's really just you just got to kind of monitor it. And but as I say, don't be surprised in a standard game if the 0-0, 1-0, and 1-0-1 go in, because that's normal. And equally, when teams do score and say it's 1-0 to a team, an underdog, then the 1-1 will be the favoured prize. That will be shorter than the 2-0. It's fairly logical that the odds on the favourite team equalising are going to be shorter. So it can be a confusing one, but just I think watch as many games as possible and see if you can anticipate or guess what's going to happen regarding the odds, and look at each one and try to work out why has that happened. Why has the 1-0 now come in? Well, because it's much later in the game and 1-0 is more likely, or why they've drifted out. It's 3 or 4 minutes in and it's 1-0. Surely they should come in. Well, no, because more goals are expected. So you'll just have to get used to that one through your own viewing. The other issue with the correct score market is not actually that liquid, and you're kind of restricted to the bigger leagues around the world. The kind of go-to site for big large amounts of stats are soccer stats. It's kind of monster really, and you get here all the popular leagues. You got the much bigger leagues. Much more variety of leagues from all over the world. If you click the leagues button, and there you can see the current status of the league, how many goals have been scored. You can look at the previous year's league tables and get a summary of the number of goals scored, and also over 2.5 percentages, over 1.5 percentages, every conceivable stat you could want. Not only the average goals for the league, but the average goals for the team in the league, how they've done for any team. And just because it's a low-scoring league doesn't mean that every team doesn't score a lot of goals. So it's I think it's €5 a month now, unfortunately, but well worth it. But if you want to find a free site, just put soccer stats into Google and see what comes up, and you might find something that gives you the same sort of detail for free. So that's hopefully answers a few questions. As I say, I'm not clearly not a teacher, but I hope that maybe you've gleaned something from this. And if you don't want to be sort of too bothered about the scores or the score lines and how they move, you've got the over-unders. If you don't want to be too bothered with the correct score market, you could take a lot of hassle out of it by betting in the overs markets, and perhaps going into the correct score market just to cover a score or two if you feel it's necessary during the match. So there's many ways to skin a cat, but hopefully this will help some of you. Okay, thanks.